I heard that this game was spooky. So we're gonna go ahead and do one of these. All right, here we go. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a game where if you separated out the core components like combat or puzzles, etc., and presented them alone, maybe with a slightly different theme, you would have a fiercely mediocre game. But Hellblade pulls it all together, wraps it up with sweet visuals and unique and interesting themes to create a package that is far greater than the sum of its parts. A package of madness and shadow, lament and misery. In a good way. Hellblade puts you into the mind of Senua, a Celtic warrior who embarks on a journey to reach Helheim, the mythical underworld of Norse mythology. On her journey, Senua is hindered not only by the various enemies she encounters, but also by her own mind. Senua suffers from severe psychosis, and it's this character trait that really makes this game as interesting as it is. Now, you may have heard that this game has a 6-minute unskippable intro that consists of nothing but whispering and Senua rowing a log. This is true, and I know that sounds boring, but I honestly found it compelling. Here Hellblade introduces one symptom of Senua's psychosis, auditory hallucinations. Now, a lesser effort would have had Senua's hallucinations exclusively as cutscene elements or as a clumsy exposition device, but Hellblade goes well beyond that. The voices for these hallucinations were recorded using a binaural microphone, and as a result, have a real sense of place. I played this game with a nice pair of headphones, as recommended by the developers, and I'm very glad I did, as the directional audio really emphasized how real these voices were, both to me as a player and to Senua as a character. These voices are constantly with you throughout the game, commenting on your actions, questioning your actions, occasionally encouraging you but mostly discouraging you, giving you deep insight to Senua's mental state at any given time. In combat, these voices almost serve as a sixth sense. Say you're being attacked by an enemy that's off screen. In this case, the voices might warn you of the impending attack with a "watch out" whispered from the direction that the attack is coming from. If you've taken a few hits, leaving Senua in a panicked state, these voices may move to discouraging you or prey upon your paranoia with an unnecessary warning. Find a good position. Let them behind you. Landing hits in combat builds up a focus meter, which you can use to enter a slow motion mode, which is pretty typical for this kind of game. But more interestingly, it lets you cut through many of Senua's hallucinations, which is necessary for many of the game's fights. On its own, Hellblade's combat is nothing remarkable. You have a light attack, a heavy attack, and the ability to chain them together in a few combos. Outside of that, you evade, block, or parry enemy attacks. Every once in a while, it may benefit you to kick your enemy to move them around or break their guard. A pretty standard action hack and slash setup. Unfortunately, the enemy variety is pretty shallow. Outside of bosses, there are only about 5 different enemy types that you'll run into, which normally would be a death sentence for this kind of game. Typically, I'd get burnt out on this caliber of combat pretty quick, but between this game's short length and the integration of Senua's psychosis, I was able to stay interested long enough to finish the game, which took me about 8 hours. It also helped that this game is super pretty. The environments in this game range from serene green forestry to a nightmare seascape of blood and corpses. The animations in this game are fantastic, and the motion capture for Senua lends an amazing degree of realism to her character. Hellblade occasionally mixes full motion video with in-game visuals, which normally can be pretty jarring. However, it manages to work in this case. The realistic motion capture and the heavily distorted FMV manage to almost meet somewhere in the middle. Hellblade is a superbly beautiful game, and fittingly comes with a built-in photo mode, chock full of adjustments and filters you can tweak to enhance your snapshots. While I personally didn't use the photo mode much myself, I could see the amount of potential here with all those options. Today's episode is brought to you by the letter R for really hard to find. The letter R for reaching the end of my patience. The letter R for are you over here? The letter R for I'm just gonna Google it. The letter R for really obvious in hindsight. The meat of the game is mostly puzzle. The formula goes solve a puzzle, walk a bit, maybe have combat, rinse and repeat. Most of these puzzles are environmental puzzles that we've seen in other games. While not particularly interesting on their own, these puzzles are slightly elevated by the context of Senua's psychosis. For example, delusions, a common symptom of psychosis, can lead someone to search for meaning and patterns in otherwise meaningless surroundings. Playing the game to progress oftentimes has you acting out behaviors typical of psychosis. Mental health is a very difficult subject to tackle, but Hellblade explores what is often taboo subject matter in a refined, authentic way. Hellblade even depicts the isolating social stigmas that surround psychosis, which is important yet commonly overlooked in other depictions. Although it may not be apparent from the mechanics alone, a lot of care was put into this game. And, as a whole, Hellblade really does shine. Hellblade is a pretty short game, clocking in at about 6 to 8 hours, and its moment-to-moment gameplay isn't anything to write home about. But for an experience as unique and interesting as Hellblade, to me, $30 is a very fair price to pay. I am not the biggest fan of horror games, and Hellblade definitely ticks off some of those horror game boxes. But even though this game is outside my usual wheelhouse, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Hellblade.
The Northmen, 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 the Northmen say that in the Northmen say, the Northmen say, the Northmen say that in the beginning there was nothing but darkness.